And at 10, Crying Child. Okay, so I'm putting this one at number 10 because I personally don't think that the Crying Child is a Springlock victim. To me, there's just no logical way that that animatronic jaw should have crushed his skull, because, you know, the Springlocks were already active and that would require a lot of power to crush a skull anyway. However, it is possible that since this is a series about haunted animatronics possessed by spirit metal, that logic kinda gets thrown out the window. So assuming that he is a Springlock victim, that's brutally scary. Being thrown into an animatronic's mouth and crying so much that you make the jaw snap onto your own skull, killing you instantly? Holy crap, that is nightmare fuel. That's why some people are scared of robots or animatronics, and while it may not be realistic, the possibility of it happening is still horrifying to say the least, especially since not even that long ago he lost his sister to Circus Baby, and that's pretty messed up. And I'm sure that Michael, who put the kid in his mouth, as long as, you know, I'm wrong about my theory, he'd be scarred for life. And I think I would be too. Before we move on to number 9, can you do me a favor and smash that like button and subscribe if you haven't yet if you are looking forward to this list. I saw a load of comments asking for it, so this better not flop. If it flops, so help me, you will all have a reckoning. The more likes we get, the more likely we are to do a part 2, and it also helps us against the algorithm almighty and lets us grow the channel, which means more cool vids for you, so you know, it's a win-win, so thank you. And at 9, The Twisted Ones. The Twisted Ones novel starts a year after The Silver Eyes ended, with Charlie in university. One day, however, Clay Burke comes to see Charlie, and for some reason brings her to see a corpse with familiar wounds. This could either be because she would recognize them, or because she was working with the police, or because they had to advance the plot. I don't know, I haven't read the original novels, but I want to. However, looking at the wounds, she confirms that they are in fact a Springlock failure, meaning that we have an unnamed Springlock victim in the Twisted Ones novel. If this character does have a name, like if it's revealed in later down the line or something, please let me know, because I couldn't find one online. However, while this may seem insignificant to you, the real horror of this number comes from what it signifies. This Springlock marks the return of William Afton, since at the same time, Clay also tells her that a blood sample they took from Afton showed that the body was a fake, or at least it was fake blood. The return of a killer, and the purple guy of all of them, that's pretty damn scary if you ask me. And it ain't The New Kid. Continuing with the theme of FNAF books, what about the story The New Kid from 1:35 AM, the third Fazbear Frights book? The story revolves around Devon, Mick, and Kelsey. Devon and Mick are outcasts. They aren't popular, they aren't cool, but when the new kid Kelsey arrives at their school, they make a new friend, despite Kelsey being charismatic and adored by everyone else in the school. Over time though, Devon grows jealous of Kelsey, since Kelsey has everything that Devon wants. So in an act of revenge or to gain control, because you know that's kind of serial killery, Devon hatches a plan to lure Kelsey to an abandoned Freddy Fazbear's to trap him in a Springlock suit for a couple hours, to try to humble him, I guess. But the plan goes horribly wrong. After getting in the suit, the Springlocks fail, as expected, because you know this is a FNAF book, causing Kelsey's blood to soak into the fur of the animatronic and pull around the ground. Devon and Mick leave Kelsey for dead so that they won't get in trouble, but something doesn't feel right. So a week later, Devon returns to make sure that Kelsey's body is still there, for some reason. He sticks his hand into the animatronic's mouth to feel if it's there, and snap! The Springlocks fail yet again, as per usual, and Devon gets his hand stuck inside the suit and bleeds out, but not before seeing a body in the suit, but with black hair instead of Kelsey's blonde hair. If that's not scary, then you need to go see a doctor, because that's bone chilling. That's messed up. No. And at 7, Grim Fredbear. Grim Fredbear is one of the antagonists from Final Nights 3 Nightmares Awoken. He's only active on Night 5 and found in the left hallway. Grim Fredbear resembles the normal golden Fredbear suit, only with his suit glowing a deep purple while the interior of the suit glows a bright white. His upper face appears to be torn off, including his eyes, leaving an empty, hollow, gaping hole in its place. The inside of the mask, though it appears like there's nothing really inside, actually conceals a white, pale human head that can only be seen during his jump scare. And before you ask, yes, it's mine. The animatronic is clearly meant to be a reference to Shadow Freddy and the theory that the Shadow animatronics were Springlock victims, which was later confirmed by Scott to be false when stating that William was the only victim of a Springlock failure. And in the museum level, which unlocks after Night 5, it is revealed that Grim Fredbear is a Springlock victim, saying, quote, another Springlock failure victim, the second generation of Fredbear. And at 6, Grim Chica. The first Springlock victim in the Final Night series, Grim Chica is a primary antagonist in Final Final Nights 3 Nightmares Awoken. Unlike others, she is not a Reaper animatronic. Grim Chica holds a strong appearance to the Springlock suit on the poster in the Night 3 cutscene, but her faceplates are very hard to spot and she's almost entirely purple. She really resembles Toy Chica. The glowing accents inside of her resemble a human corpse. She lacks a bib unlike the original Chica, and her overall body is very slim like the original Toy Chica, except for her hips, which appear to be much wider. Got the baby birth in hips. I regret that immediately. And she lacks shoulders or upper arms, with her forearms protruding from her armpits. Grim Chica is also revealed to be a Springlock victim in the museum level, saying, quote, "A victim of a Springlock failure, forever forced to haunt the suit she is wearing, now being manipulated by your sister and mother. Tried spray on tan, still very pale." Why is that so relatable to me? Like, no matter what I do, I'll always be pale and pasty. Not the whole being manipulated by your sister and mother thing. That's weird. But like, I'm okay with forever being pasty. However, I did rank this above Grim Foxy because like, it's Chica. And look what they did to my girl Chica. I'm sorry, Mommy Kentucky, for the transgressions. Halfway through in at number 5, Garvey. A psychopathic, cold-blooded killer. He stopped being human long ago. That's how Garvey is described in the extras of Dormitibus, the game from which he hails. Garvey is the penultimate antagonist of Dormitibus, and as a human, he was the man who murdered the missing children. He later went on to get trapped in Spring Bonnie, becoming Springtrap, and then was burnt to a permanent death in the Fazbear Frights fire. Garvey is a more gory version of Springtrap from FNAF 3. However, he is not William Afton, as the game was released before the name reveal, even before FNAF 4. Springtrap, but with hardly any exosuit or animatronic casing, whatever you want to call it. He crawls on all fours and uses his left hand as a foot and his left foot as a hand, like some demonic monkey from hell that Satan didn't sanction the creation of. Just look at this thing and tell me that it shouldn't be on this list. If you do, you'll be lying. And at 4, Golden Call. As a human, when alive, Golden Call's name was Kyle. However, he is now a Springlock victim stuck inside a Golden Freddy Springlock suit. Golden Call has the typical rundown Springlock suit vibe, similar to Springtrap. However, this is even more gruesome. His left ear is bent, he has guts coming out of basically every hole in his body, human eyes are hanging out of the animatronic's eye sockets. He's even missing exosuit on his right foot, and the character is holding a flesh-colored, at least it's flesh-colored, it may be even fully like a flesh phone in his right hand that stays stuck to his head via more flesh or blood strands connecting to the side of his head. It's horrifying, dude. This is a monstrosity. And looking at his age on the wiki, Kyle was only 5 when he got Springlocked, which is absolutely nuts and just flat out horrible. So unfortunate, man. He was supposed to be the next best Fortnite player. That's a joke for the long-term subs. You know it. And at 3, Am I Real? Am I Real, also known as Cake Bear, is presumably the primary and most recurrent antagonist in Dormitibus. Am I Real has 2 different forms. His first form is Cake Bear. Cake Bear's design originated from the Save Him minigame, where he delivered cake to children while a kid is murdered outside. He is the predecessor of both Fredbear and Freddy Fazbear. Cake Bear is a brown bear animatronic that also acts like a Springlock suit that appears in most of the main nights. Although they do look similar, the only similarities he has to Freddy Fazbear in reality is that they both possess a top hat, are brown, have blue eyes, and are a bear. Am I Real's second form is a form that resembles Springtrap, however. This form has a green color much like Springtrap and contains human remains. His right eye socket has gotten bigger on the side and a big hole can be seen on the right side of his head. His top hat has received some withering on it as well, and his lower jaw is slanted and worn down, no longer circular like Cake Bear's. He also has a sizable hole in the right side of his torso, revealing organs. Ha, lovely. Rips and tears cover his arms, revealing more human remains. He also appears to be missing at least 1 finger on his right hand, and it's absolutely terrifying to look at. Of course, 3 out of 10 of these are going to be from Dormitibus. Like, what did you think was gonna happen? Did you watch the Dormitibus animatronics list? Penultimately, in at number 2, Springtrap. I believe we all know this story by now. Everything was going well at first. They couldn't pin him down and he was on his way to immortality. Once William discovered Remnant, however, he spiraled. He wanted to use it to fuel his life and make himself truly immortal. So in an effort to study it further, William lures possessed animatronics to the back room that they can't access and uses it to display dismantle them, planning to melt down their endoskeletons to make soul-infused metal. However, by doing this, he unknowingly releases the souls of the victims he claimed oh so long ago. Shocked, he tries to scare them by getting into his spring body suit, which also coincidentally makes him feel more powerful. However, this haste coupled with the leaking in the back room causes the springlocks to fail, crushing him in torturous agony for the next 30 years. However, he didn't die from this. As we learn in the Man in Room 1280, he was being kept alive by the spirit of another victim. So he was living that agonizing pain for 30 years, and that makes him damn well deserving of the number 2 spot. And before you ask, no, him and Garvey are 2 separate characters, meaning that they can both be included on this list. You're welcome. Finally, in at number 1, you. A spoiler alert for a fan game, and if I say which fan game, it's going to spoil it. So if you want to avoid spoilers, click away now. And thanks for watching. I'll give you a chance to do that now. Okay, now that you've prepared for spoilers, A Shadow Over Freddy's is a FNAF fan game created by Fiznam on GameJolt. It released on April 25th, 2018, and since it was made by the same guy who is currently working on FNAF Plus for the Fazbear fanverse, you know it's bound to be good. The gameplay of A Shadow Over Freddy's is a hybrid between a traditional point-and-click game and a free-roaming horror game. The player wakes up to find themselves with no memories in a black and white abandoned Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and is tasked with surviving 5 nights in escaping the restaurant. The player is given a different task each night and must complete said task before 6 AM and without being attacked by any roaming animatronics. However, the ending of the game has you getting trapped in a Springlock suit and left to rot, meaning that you are a Springlock victim, which is probably the scariest victim of them all, cause I don't know about you, but I'd rather not get Springlocked. Although I know there are plenty of you that would just love that. You'd fill the suit with liquids that aren't blood, and that's messed up. Like, I'm not one for kink shaming, but yeah, there's kinks, and then there's like being killed, you know? I don't know how else to put that. And at 10, William Afton. Again, could William have suffered a Springlock failure before getting trapped in the spring bodysuit like we see in FNAF 3? It's possible, and it certainly appears like that's the case in the FNAF novels, since William is described to have scars that are consistent with the Springlock failure before becoming Springtrap in the novels. So could it have happened in the games? Could William have been the reason the Springlock suits were retired? Since we hear of an unfortunate incident at the sister location, so is that unfortunate incident William? There are plenty of people it could be, but William having to deal with it would certainly get them put out of commission for a time. But with William continuing to use the suit and putting it on when the room was wet like we see in FNAF 3's cutscene, it suggests that that's probably unlikely, but it's still possible. So since this list is possible Springlock victims, I think he deserves to be on this list, at least at number 10, since can we really talk about Springlock victims without mentioning good old Willie Afton? Exactly. And at 9, Henry Emily. Now this is certainly an interesting case, because seemingly Henry has died multiple ways across FNAF canons, with his first apparent death being in FNAF World at the hands of Baby. His death in the novels seems to have happened before Silver Eyes starts, and then he dies in FNAF 6 along with everything else. But could one of these deaths involve the Springlock failure, or something having to do with Springlocks? I mean, maybe Afton offed Henry in one of these realities, or maybe Baby has some Springlock mechanisms inside her when she killed Henry. Hell, maybe Henry just climbed into the wrong suit at the wrong time. It's a question that we don't really pay attention to because, well, Henry's death doesn't mean much to the story, unfortunately, but it's still true. Henry dying doesn't really mean much to the overall FNAF lore, and we didn't even know he was alive until FNAF 6, so maybe for irony's sake, Scott had him bite the dust in a quicker way, rather than just, you know, burning alive, because that sucks. Maybe he wanted to prevent himself from even more severe agony so that he didn't possess something. And at 8, Phone Guy. Phone Guy's death is one of the most mysterious deaths of all. We hear him die in FNAF 1 on night 4 with the sound of multiple animatronics banging on his doors, but we never really get an explanation as to what happens to him. We know he dies, but other than that, it's all speculation. One of the theories though is that animatronics got him and shoved him into a suit, resulting in a very painful death, especially since at this point the Springlock suits were either still in operation or hadn't been totally removed. The actual timeline of the events of the Springlock suits is a little messy, messy since we don't really have years for things like them getting scrapped, yet it's still possible that Phone Guy was shoved into one or maybe used it to hide. After all, maybe Phone Guy is secretly William Afton and Scott just didn't want us to know that yet or something. I still feel like that might have been in the realm of possibility. Maybe not now, but it was. And at 7, Michael Afton. This relies on heavy speculation and assumption. However, if the entered enema is truly what killed Michael's body, then could it be considered a spring locking? We don't really know if the Funtime animatronics have spring locks, but we can assume that they do thanks to their moving parts and abilities like a giant claw that goes out and stores items. But this would also mean that Ennard would have at least some of those same parts. So if the Funtime animatronics that were made around the same time as the original Springlock animatronics used similar parts or techniques, which is likely, that means that Michael Afton would also be a Springlock victim. We don't need solid proof since this is a possible Springlocking victims list, so proof of possibility is all I really need. And honestly, I think that this would provide a good explanation as to why he turned purple, since people who die don't turn purple. Instead, if they rot, they would most likely be depicted as green, especially when another major character is linked to the color purple. So, if that is indeed bruising, it would make sense if the Springlock mechanisms were hurting him from the inside out. And at 6, Bite of 87. The Bite of 87 is such an infamous incident that I can already hear people groaning in the comments. However, what if the victim of the Bite of 87, whoever that actually was a victim of a Springlock failure? It could make sense, since the animatronics had no harmful tendencies before this, so a Springlock failure is a reasonable assumption as to why someone got a frontal lobe removed. And a Springlock failure, assumingly, would definitely provide enough power to do that, since the Springlocks themselves would snap with such ferocity, and would probably circumvent the whole needing more power to do that thing. And if it was Jeremy, it would explain why the animatronics were suspended, because now one of their employees was bit and they had to promote him and fork over some extra cash to make sure that he didn't sue. So overall, whoever the Bite of 87 victim is could definitely have been a Springlock victim. Halfway through into number 5, Shadow animatronics. One of the oldest theories is that the Shadow animatronics are the first Springlock victims. This comes to us after the FNAF 3 Phone Guy dialogue that mentioned multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures, which some interpreted as multiple Springlock suits failing at once, since the term Springlock in this situation is used to describe the suit as a whole and the individual Springlock mechanisms that hold back all the robotic parts in the suit. So the line of multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures could mean multiple of the Springlocks inside the suit failing at the same time, or more than one suit failing at the same time. This led some to theorize that previous employees were killed in the Springlock suits, which is where the Shadow animatronics came from. This is supported by the fact that these shadows are of Freddy and Bonnie, the two animatronics that have Springlock versions. And while there are holes in this theory, there is potential that this is the case. So the Shadow animatronics are possible Springlock victims. I'm gonna have to keep saying that because people in the comments are gonna get mad. It's like, oh, they weren't Springlock, they could have been. It's possible, and that's the list, okay? And at 4, Cassidy. Cassidy is the most mysterious victim in the missing children's incident. Her name was hidden for years, only really being discovered recently, and honestly we don't know too much about her. We don't know how she died, so the potential is there for her to be a Springlock victim. Maybe William knew that it would be easier that way. After all, she does possess Golden Freddy, who we figure it was a Springlock suit that ended up having the guts removed, hence the slumped overness. However, if this was the case and Cassidy's body was in that suit, they would have found it when they were gutting him. But maybe William was the one who gutted it, considering how he was the suit technician. And I mean, like, to be fair, for a suit technician, he did miss a fatal flaw with the animatronics that he literally designed, since, you know, he got snapped when the suit was wet. Either way, Cassidy being a Springlock victim would help explain a lot in the series. Just, you know, the hallucinations and whatnot. Getting close to the end into number 3, Kelsey. Kelsey is in essence the main antagonist of the Fazbear Fright story, the new kid from the third Fazbear Frights book 135 AM. Kelsey had just moved to town and ends up making friends with the protagonist Devin. Devin ends up getting jealous of how much everyone loves Kelsey, so he hatches a plan with his friend to trap him in a Springlock suit for a few hours. However, when they unleash their plan, the Springlock suit fails and kills Kelsey. At least, so they thought. Since a week later, Devin returns to make sure Kelsey is still there, for some reason, only to find a different body in the suit. He knows that it's someone else because the hair color's different, and then Devin gets stuck and bleeds out, only for the story to cut back to Kelsey meeting 2 more kids at his new school. This is an interesting story because while Kelsey did get Springlocked, he ended up being fine. So what happened? Some think that Kelsey is a ghost, while some think that he's the one you should not have killed, but no matter what, we all feel like there is a high possibility that Kelsey was a Springlock victim, at least when they were alive. We don't know how and we don't know when, but it's a definite possibility. Penultimately, in at number 2, missing children. Much like the Cassidy situation, the entirety of the missing children involved in the missing children's incident may have been Springlock victims. We're still unsure as to the method of extermination that William used on the screaming pests. Sorry, the kids who run around in my building hallways they're still getting to me. If they ever go missing though, these videos are not going to help me. Anyway, we don't know how William dispatched of these kids before shoving them into the suits, and honestly there may not be a way that he killed them before shoving them in. The act of putting them in the suits may very well have been what killed them, which would make sense given that a Springlock incident would be more agonizing than a simple knife to the chest. And a Springlock collapse would be a more realistic way for the suits to start leaking blood and other fluids, since one knife wound wouldn't really do that, especially around their eyes. Even if the suits didn't snap closed, if William shoved them into the suits, that's close enough for me. Finally, in at number 1, crying child. Okay, now this one is going to be controversial, but there is no way that I could do this list without mentioning one of the greatest debates in my DMs ever. The amount of people who message me on Instagram not asking about my game's Kickstarter, but rather the bite of 83 and how it had to have been a Springlocking bothers me to my core. I say this every time I'm bringing it up. I don't think that this was a Springlock failure. That being said, it's still possible, and that's what this list is about. The reason I don't think it was a Springlock failure is because the Fredbear suit was already in animatronic mode, meaning no Springlocks would have a chance of failing. Since, keep in mind, a Springlock failure refers to the Springlock mechanism failing to stay open, meaning it snaps back into animatronic mode. That's why it's bad if someone is inside, and there would be no Springlock mechanism in and around the mouth because it would always be in animatronic mode, since the jaw just moves up and down. But nevertheless, it's still a possibility, since logic and physics doesn't seem to apply to the FNAF world, which is made evident by those goddamn doors from FNAF 1. Even if they're electromagnet, they would still be open with power, so if they ran out of power, they would end up closing. Just saying.
Number 10, animated Scrap Trap. Not even an animated or cartoon version of Scrap Trap can redeem Scrap Trap's overall horrific image. Even when you try to make Scrap Trap cute, he remains one of the most terrifying animatronics around. This version of Scrap Trap and Springtrap is sometimes made to look a little less monstrous, given a shorter stature, is made cuter, and given less malicious expressions. But then there is still a very evident dark side that shines through. I mean, just look at this grin here. Springtrap, even when animated, is still always up to something, and should basically never be trusted. Nor should Scrap Trap. Number 9, Electric Scrap Trap. Electric Scrap Trap just sounds like a horrifying idea. Any animatronic just sounds awful, to be honest, because if the animatronics were electric, they could then harm you at range, and being near them wouldn't just mean you'd get jump scared, but also mean you could get shocked to death. Or possibly, I suppose, shocked to life? If you suffered a heart attack from the jump scare, actually maybe the electric shock would restart your heart. Wait, but then you'd be stuck in an endless loop of death, with the animatronics jump scaring you and then reviving you on repeat, possibly forever. So never mind, still not so great, and pretty scary overall. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more fan alternate FNAF lists, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Every time you thumbs up a video, a new fan alternate comes into being. Some fan somewhere is like, I gotta draw this idea. Number 8, Fixed Springtrap / Scrap Trap. Fixed Scrap Trap doesn't sound scary at first, and then you see what some fans have done with this design. The eyes for many versions that I've looked at is what makes this fan-made alternate so unsettling for me. The fact that everything on this animatronic looks put together and almost brand new, save for the fact that you can still kind of tell there is someone in the suit, and someone who might not be doing well, and is likely still dead. The contrast of that clean suit with those manic eyes is pretty much what haunts me here. Something very unhinged about this version. Number 7, Expectation Scrap Trap. This is a design that was shared with the idea in mind of what Springtrap should or could look like once he became Scrap Trap. It was shared on Reddit and shows Scrap Trap reimagined as being patched up with various different parts and bits from other animatronics, fully formed as opposed to being quite so tattered and broken. Well, still tattered I suppose, but just with less pieces missing overall, just also a little more put together looking in my opinion. Expectation Scrap Trap to me is a lot more colorful, which reduces some of the scare factor, but this version of Scrap Trap is also more functional, which is pretty scary. And I think it makes sense that Scrap Trap would patch themselves up with like actual animatronic pieces that we might recognize, considering whose corpse is also inside here, and therefore who the pilot behind that animatronic really is. You'd think you see some reflection with, like, you know, maybe some other animatronic pieces that we've seen before, that this person may have also made, you know what I mean? Number 6. Peekaboo Scrap Trap. I like to call this one Peekaboo Scrap Trap just for the way this redesign looks. The main difference between this version of the character and the original one from the games is that we can more easily see William Afton's head here, or what's left of it at least. The new head on this version has the original animatronic head sitting more back and up, as though the top of the head was pulled up and away from the bottom half, the jaw. The top part of the animatronic head kind of rests on top of, well, I guess whatever is left of William Afton's head inside the suit, kind of like when you put sunglasses on top of your head for easy access and safekeeping when you no longer want to be wearing them on your face. The result is a very eerie face that we get to see, still shrouded in darkness, peering out at us from inside the gaping hole where the animatronic's mouth is open wide. This specific fan-made redesign that I'm talking about here was shared by Atlas Zodiac on Reddit. You should check it out because it's pretty creepy and pretty great. Number 5. Springtrap After the Fire. This fan-made alternate version allows one to imagine what it would be like to gaze upon Springtrap after he's already been melted by the flames and forever altered. Mostly he looks kind of distorted and goopy here. Overall, just not pleasant to gaze upon or spy lurking in the shadows behind you. Springtrap After the Fire often has more organs exposed, or in some cases has no outer suit left at all. Some fan-made takes on this version also show that the corpse beneath has lost its eyes, with them supposedly melting away in the flames, while other versions show the eyes as somewhat malformed due to the heat, becoming somehow, I guess, partially melted. Alternatively, one fan reimagined this version of Springtrap as just a pile of ashes with eyes and an arm sticking out. Seems pretty accurate. Number 4. Burned Scrap Trap. Typically the Burned Scrap Trap fan-made version reveals to us a version of this animatronic who has less limbs and less of a suit left. The skeleton beneath the corpses and organs is revealed in some parts, prominently the skull. One take has the entire upper head of the suit missing, with little stumps of wire where the ears would be. Imagine being burnt in a suit with metal ears on it. It would not be pleasant at all. And it would probably be very hot on your head as that metal started to heat up. I'm like imagining what it would be like, and it's already like just painful to me. I'm surprised we don't see more burned versions of Scrap Trap with melted brains actually oozing out of the nose holes. Going into a fire, it seems like a goopy or boiled brain would be a very real reality. Number 3. Hellfire Scrap Trap. Possibly one of the scariest alternate versions of Scrap Trap around when it comes to fan-made versions. This version of the killer animatronic possesses an even sharper bone shank, and it looks like it's partially melted, with the outer part of the suit looking like it has melded or completely melted with the corpse of William Afton beneath it. Basically, this version of Scrap Trap looks like it has returned from hell after being placed into its otherworldly blazing fires, which could very well be the story of what happened in this scenario, just based on the fan-made animatronic's appearance. This version of Scrap Trap also only seems to have one eye left remaining. One eye left. The depth perception must be really not great for that version of Scrap Trap. Number 2. Ignited Springtrap. All that remains seemingly of this version of Springtrap is his skeleton. Ignited Springtrap seems almost chalky when it comes to his look, being that he is mostly just bits of burnt flesh and suit and exposed brittle bones. The one plus about this scary fan-made version, if you had to face it, is that you would probably find it pretty easy to defeat because it's just a walking skeleton, which means it probably wouldn't be that strong as it has no muscles left. At least that's how I always imagine fighting skeletons in real life, but then again, being just bones means that you're likely harder to hit with a ranged attack as you have less mass, so I guess there are pros and cons to taking on skeletal enemies like Ignited Springtrap. Number 1. Scorched Scrap Trap / Springtrap. Yeah, there are lots of different versions that like to reimagine Springtrap or Scrap Trap as being pretty heavily burnt. Scorched Scrap Trap is no exception. This fan-made fire-based version of the animatronic, however, I think is one of the scariest. Why? Because it reimagines the animatronic as something that is a little less human-like in appearance to me. One fan-made version shows the scorched version in half shadow, obstructing its facial features from clear view and making it appear more ominous. Other versions imagine scorched Scraptrap as resembling the burned up ghost version that haunted us in FNAF 3 at the Fazbear's Fright attraction. Because obviously at that time Springtrap was around and was alive, so not a ghost. Just a corpse in a suit.
And at 10, Grim Chica. The first Springlock victim in the Final Nights series, Grim Chica is a primary antagonist in Final Nights 3 Nightmares Awoken. Unlike the others, she is not a Reaper animatronic. Grim Chica holds a strong appearance to the Springlock suit on the poster for the Night 3 cutscene, but her face plates are very hard to spot. And she's also almost entirely purple. The glowing accents inside of her resemble a human corpse. She lacks a bib unlike the original Chica. Her overall body is very slim like the original toy Chica, except for her hips, which appear to be much wider for birthing purposes, and she lacks shoulders or upper arms, with her forearms protruding from her armpits. Grim Chica is also revealed to be a Springlock victim in the museum levels, saying, quote, "A victim of a Springlock failure, forever forced to haunt the suit she was wearing. Now being manipulated by your sister and mother. Tried spray on tan, still very pale." I relate to that. No matter what I do, I'll always be pale and pasty, okay? But I'm fine with that. However, while she is also a Springlock victim, she's in the suit that she was wearing, therefore she is a Springlock animatronic. Alright, so I'm like, come on. I mean, I'll also be like, what did you do to my girl Chica? Like, I'm sorry, Mommy Kentucky. I didn't mean to. These are transgressions. Keep my wife's name! And at 9, Grim Fredbear. Grim Fredbear is one of the antagonists of Final Nights 3 Nightmares Awoken. He is only active on Night 5 and is found in the left hallway. Grim Fredbear resembles the normal golden Fredbear, only with his suit glowing a deep purple color while the interior of the suit glows a bright white. His upper face appears to be torn off, including his eyes, leaving an empty, hollow, gaping hole in its place. That sounded weird. The inside of the mask, though it appears like there is nothing inside, actually conceals a white, pale human head that can only be seen during his jump scare. And before you ask, yes, it's mine. This animatronic is clearly meant to be a reference to Shadow Freddy and the theory that these Shadow animatronics were Springlock victims, which is later confirmed by Scott to be false when stating that only William was a victim of a Springlock failure. But in the museum level of this game, which unlocks after Night 5, it is also revealed that Grim Fredbear is a Springlock suit, saying, quote, "Another Springlock failure victim, the second generation of Fredbear." And at 8, Golden Call. As a human when alive, Golden Call's name was Kyle. However, now he is a Springlock victim stuck inside a Golden Freddy Springlock suit. Golden Call has the typical run-down Springlock suit vibe, similar to Springtrap. However, this is much more gruesome. His left ear is bent, he has bugs coming out of basically every hole in the body, human eyes are hanging out of the animatronic's eye sockets, just dangling there, like my grandfather's tie. He's missing an exosuit on his right foot, and the character is holding a flesh-colored, at least flesh-colored, it might even be flesh-made phone in his right hand that stays stuck to his head via more flesh and blood strands connecting it. Yeah, it's gross. It's a monstrosity. And looking at the age on the wiki, Kyle was only 5 years old when he got Springlocked, which is absolutely just horrible. God, that sucks. That would be rough. I would be offended if that happened to me. Like, yo, I'm only 5. What did I do to deserve this? And at 7, Am I Real? Am I Real, also known as Cake Bear, is presumably the primary and most recurring antagonist in Dormitibus. Am I Real has 2 different forms. His first form is Cake Bear. Cake Bear's design originated from the Save Him minigame, where he delivered cake to children while a child is killed outside. He is also the predecessor to both Fredbear and Freddy Fazbear. Cake Bear is a brown bear animatronic that also acts as a Springlock suit that appears in most of the main nights. Although they look slightly similar, the only similarities that he has to Freddy Fazbear is that they're both bears, and they wear a top hat, are brown, and have blue eyes. That's about it. Am I Real's second form is Am I Real, and is a form that resembles Springtrap. This form has a green color much like Springtrap, and contains human remains, because of course it does. His right eye socket has gotten bigger on the side, and a big hole can be seen on the right side of his head. His top hat has received some withering on it as well, and his lower jaw is slanted and worn down. No longer circular like Cake Bear's. He has a sizable hole in the right side of his torso, revealing organs inside. Rips and tears also cover his arms, revealing even more human remains. He appears to be missing at least one finger on his right hand, and is absolutely terrifying to look at. Of course, a decent amount of these are going to be from Dormitibus, because, like, have you seen the Dormitibus animatronics? They're just horrifying. Speaking of which, in at number 6, Garvey, a psychopathic, cold-blooded killer. He stopped being human long ago. That's how Garvey is described in the extras of Dormitibus, the game from which he hails. Garvey is the penultimate antagonist to Dormitibus, and as a human, he was a man who killed the missing children, and later went on to get trapped in Spring Bonnie, becoming Springtrap, and then was burnt to a permanent death in the Fazbear Frights fire. That's where these two differ, okay? Garvey is a much more gory version of Springtrap from FNAF 3, and one that actually dies. However, it is not William Afton, as this game was released before the name reveal, so even before FNAF 4. Springtrap, but with hardly any exosuit or animatronic casing, whatever you want to call it, right? He crawls on all fours, uses his left hand as a foot and his left foot as a hand, like some demon crab thing that I did not want in my life, okay? Like, just look at this thing and tell me that it's right. You'll be lying. You're wrong if you think that this is okay. Halfway through into number 5, Bread Bear. Bread Bear is an animatronic coming from the Day Shift at Freddy series who was created by Dave by modifying a Fredbear suit. The character appears in Day Shift at Freddy's 1, 2, and 3. Bread Bear's appearance is oddly similar to Fredbear, albeit wider, I guess because of the gluten. He is a golden colored bear animatronic wearing a purple top hat and bow tie, and 2 black and white buttons on his chest. He has gray metallic eyes, thicker arms and legs, a squarish brown nose, small brown pupils, small white teeth, round ears, with the insides being a lighter shade of color, and a very circular shaped stomach with brownish shades scattered amongst it. He has rips around his feet joints and arm joints, and he appears for real when Dave modifies an empty Fredbear suit and unleashes it during the Sting operation on Friday, in which, depending on which route you took, it either attempts to kill Jack, dies, or it destroys the entire pizza joint and then sets itself on fire. And you know what? We love that. We love the chutzpah. That's the kind of tactics we need in this cutthroat animatronic world. Coming in at 4, Shadow Spring Bonnie. Shadow Spring Bonnie is one of the 2 primary antagonists of Final Nights 2. He is also one of the final animatronics in that game. Shadow Spring Bonnie resembles Springtrap, as to be expected when mentioning Springlock suits, and similar to Springtrap, he lacks the suit on his feet and has the majority of his right ear missing. But overall, he has rips, but is not really missing any limbs or parts at all, which is a stark contrast to the burnt animatronics from the first 4 nights of Final Nights 2. His face glows white, which is notable when he is in the hallway, but also gives him a more sinister appearance, and pushes the something supernatural idea that most of these animatronics have, well, the shadow ones at least. Like Shadow Bonnie from FNAF AR, okay? It's something like the Winchesters are gonna have to hunt. Well, Winchester. Shadow Spring Bonnie takes on the role of Burnt Freddy and Burnt Foxy on night 5. He is very fast, so the player must seal the vent quickly, otherwise they'll get jump scared, and he can also appear in the hallway. Never use the flashlight though, or you will get insta-gipped. Also, if he appears in the hallway, inspect his face, okay? If he's twitching, close the door, then a rattling sound will let you know when he's left, but if he's not twitching, don't. Okay, the fact that you need to look at his face to actually like kind of focus on it just makes him worse, okay? I don't like looking at faces, okay? I'm an antisocial person. Getting close to the end, in at number 3, Reaper Spring Bonnie. Reaper Spring Bonnie, however, is the opposite of Shadow Spring Bonnie. This Reaper variant appears in Final Nights 3 and 4 and is an absolute monstrosity, but is definitely more terrifying in Final Nights 4, okay? He is 100% the scariest animatronic in those games. In essence, Reaper Spring Bonnie is a nightmare Springtrap. He has sharp teeth and a very damaged and withered body. His suit is a dark yellow in color. He sports a big purple bow tie on his upper chest, kind of like Glitch Trap does, which is ironic given that this released first, I'm pretty sure. And like other Reaper animatronics, Reaper Spring Bonnie has a pair of hollow dark eyes, kind of like my ex. In Final Nights 4, however, his appearance is much more disfigured and gruesome, with sharper teeth, sharper claws, a different jaw, growths resembling kind of shoulder pads made of fungi, and a gooier appearance overall. He's also missing half of his right ear, kind of like Springtrap. I mean, like, that's kind of like a given at this point. Like, if you're missing half your ear, it's a reference to Springtrap. But oh my god, okay, this thing is more terrifying than Springtrap. Like, this is what Springtrap should have been. Or honestly, what I think a nightmare Springtrap would look like I said. This is like a prototype burn trap in my eyes. Or like a melt trap, which is probably gonna be the next iteration of Afton. Proto Trap though, that's a good one. And ultimately, in at number 2, you! Spoiler alert for a fan game, but if I say which fan game, I'm going to spoil it. So if you want to avoid spoilers, click array right now. You can probably just skip to the next number using the timestamps, okay? Alright. I'll give you a chance to do that, and okay, that's your chance. That's it. You're done. Okay. A Shadow Over Freddy's is a FNAF fan game created by Fiznom on Game Jolt. It was released on the 25th of April 2018, and since it was made by the same guy who's currently working on FNAF Plus for the Fazbear fanverse, you know it's bound to be good. The gameplay of Ace Off is a hybrid between the traditional point-and-click game and a free-roaming horror game. The player wakes up to find themselves with no memories in a black and white abandoned Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and is tasked with surviving 5 nights and escaping the restaurant. The player is given a different task each night that they must complete before 6 a.m. and without being attacked by any roaming animatronics, obviously. However, the ending to the game has you getting trapped in a Springlock suit and being left to rot, meaning that you are a Springlock animatronic, which is probably one of the scariest things of all, because I don't know you, but like I'd rather not get spring-locked. It's also revealed that you then play as Afton, so it's kind of a fan character, kind of not, but like it's a fan way of having it happen. All right, good enough for me. And finally, in at number 1, Fred Trap. To be honest, I searched this up just for the hell of it because like originally we thought that Afton was using the Golden Freddy suit to kill people, but there are actually Fredbear versions of Springtrap. Fredbear is exactly what you'd expect. Springtrap's look on a yellow Freddy animatronic. The designs are actually really well made and honestly scarier than normal Springtrap for me, and like I don't know why. I guess like for some reason when I just think bears are scarier than bunnies. I wonder why. I think that Scott made William use the Spring Bonnie suit because of how scared Scott was of Bonnie, but that's just idle speculation. That's like my kind of headcanon. There are also even more rundown versions and even scrap versions of Fred Trap, which are already haunting when you don't think about the fact that it would still be William inside the suit being kept alive by the spirit of his dead son. Fred Trap is definitely one of the most strangely horrifying versions of Fredbear or any Springlock animatronic that I've seen, and that's pretty damn impressive.